Hello and welcome to SeniorCare's Living Wisely, Aging Well. We discuss topics of interest to elders 60 and over and also adults living with disabilities. I'm Tracy Arabian and today my guest is Linnea Hagberg. Linnea is SeniorCare's Director of Community Programs and the Planner. Welcome, Linnea. Thank you so much for joining me today.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Today we are going to discuss the Older Americans Act of 1965 and Older Americans Month. So Linnea, what is Older Americans Month?
Well, good question. Older Americans Month is really a federally designated month that's intended to celebrate older Americans. It happens every year in May, and it's started back in 1963.
Excellent. And can you tell me, I understand that Older Americans Month honors older Americans for contributions and such that they've made to us. Can you give us a few examples of some of the contributions that we are honoring?
Certainly. Of course, there's sort of the big national, people, folks like Ruth Bader Ginsburg or Betty White, who, really lived really long, productive lives and stayed active in their careers right up until the very end and gave a lot back. On a more local level, or there's really a lot of people who are older, who are still working and creating and giving back to the professions that they've done their entire lives, or their hobbies. There's folks who have been singing in choirs since they were in high school and they continue to do so and enrich the lives of everyone around them. And certainly a lot of older Americans are doing tremendous amounts of caregiving. They're caregiving for younger children, their grandchildren. They may be caregiving for their spouses or siblings. And a lot of older Americans are actually caregiving for other older Americans, that prior generation before them. So they're caring for their own parents. And then finally, there's plenty of folks who have retired and have a little bit more time, although everyone I know who is retired always says they're busier than they ever were. But oftentimes that's because they're engaged in doing things that are giving back to the community. At SeniorCare, we have a retired volunteer program that has 400 or more really active, terrific volunteers in it that are helping out every day in a lot of the programs that we do. So volunteering is another way that people give back. People bake pies for their neighbors at home, or they help, they walk a neighbor's dog or weed their yard. So, there's a lot of ways that people continue to contribute.
Well, thank you. I know that my mother-in-law and my father-in-law made it. I couldn't have been a working mother without the contributions. And they were in their 70s, 80s, and 90s. And my working world would not have existed without them. So I totally understand what you're saying. Tell me about how Older Americans Month came to be.
It really came out of the Kennedy administration back in 1963. And there was awareness. Kennedy had a meeting with, I believe it was the National Senior Citizens Group. There's another word that's kind of, senior citizens is not a term that we embrace very much anymore. But from that was an awareness that we needed to pay a little bit more attention to the particular needs of older adults. And so in '63, that was the first Older Americans Month. And ever since then, every May, there's been a presidential proclamation designating May as Older Americans Month. More importantly, it was really the start of attention being paid to the needs of older adults and specific needs of older adults. And that was kind of the starting point, and it grew from there.
So Older Americans Month started in 1963, and in '65, they passed the first Older Americans Act. Can you tell me about that?
Well, the Older Americans Act was really a way of formalizing a lot of services, bringing in to very specific services to help support older adults at the federal level. And it started with anything from, Medicare was also passed right around that same time. So obviously Medicare is a key a key service for, older Americans. And then the Older Americans Act, one of the early pieces of legislation from that was something called the Federal Nutrition Programs. That actually came a few years later. But it was, again, intentional legislation to provide services and supports to help older Americans.
Excellent.
Back when we had the first Older Americans Act, there were only 17 million Americans who were 65 years of age or older, and about a third of those folks were living in poverty. So there was a very clear and specific need to help do something to lift people up and keep a good standard of life.
Excellent. Tell me about senior care programs specifically that are funded through the Older Americans Act.
One is caregiver support. We just spoke about that. So that's provided specific funding that's gone, put into to help caregivers. I mean, at SeniorCare, we have caregiver support groups, we have respite programs, and other services that just help caregivers do the very important and vital work that they do. Mm-hmm. The nutrition program is another good example. The nutrition program at both, we have the federal level of it, and that just means that everyone who is, the cut point for that service is actually age 60. So everyone who is age 60 or older in the United States is able to access a meal. If you need a home delivered meal, you can get it delivered to your home. And if, excuse me, we also have community dining programs where people can eat in the company of their peers and have a chance to take advantage of the other programs that a lot of them are at councils on aging that have a whole lot of other programming that people can access at the same time.
Excellent. So if a person was interested in the caregiver support or the nutrition program, how would they go about getting involved with that?
Well, the first step really for any of SeniorCare services is to call our information and referral department. So that's 978-281-1750. I don't know if we have do an 800 number as well, but really that's that first stop, is to just call up and ask to speak to somebody in information and referral, and they will take your information and help steer you in the right direction to any programs. You can also visit the SeniorCare website, and a lot of that information is in writing on the website, and there's links on the website that help you, get more information or lead into finding out more.
Excellent. And what's the definition of an older adult? I mean, if I was 18 years old, 22 years old would be an older adult to me. Now, obviously, we're not talking about 22-year-olds. How are older adults defined both by the law and by practical activities?
Well, so good question again, and it's really elastic. I mean, if you think about it, a 4-year-old, there's an awful lot of 4-year-olds out there who are the older sibling to someone. So it clearly, it really is relative. For the Older Americans Act and the older, the cut point is 65, and that's really more linked to something like Medicare, where you need to be 65 in order to access that service. For senior care services, and a lot of Older Americans Act services, even for the nutrition program, for example, you only need to be 60. So again, it's still a very relative term. So if you think about a 65-year-old and you go forward, 25 or 30 years, a 65-year-old is defined as being older. So is an 85 or a 90-year-old, and they may have a very, very different set of needs. You go back 20 years and think about a 45-year-old compared to a 65-year-old and where they are in their life, and they may be, depending on when you had, or if you had children, you may be thinking about colleges, or you may be done with colleges and thinking about what the next stage of your life is going to be. So the same thing, at every stage there's a lot of differences. So it's hard to sort of homogenize older adults and say, okay, it's not like you wake up one day and you're 65 and all of a sudden you're old. And then there's also a difference between old and older. So I think oftentimes that, a very definitive age is linked to when you can access services. As to when somebody maybe feels old or older, that may be never. And it may be, there may be 60-year-olds, not that they would necessarily be defined as any, feeling older, but may need services because of whatever combination of, genetics and life. And, it could turn out that at 60 you may need a very full range of services. And, at 85 or 90, somebody may call up and say, hey, gee, I think I'd like to have home delivered meals. I spoke to somebody one time years ago about home delivered meals, and she said, I may not really need meals, but I'm 92 years old and I have cooked every single day of my life since I was 20 years old, and I'm kind of tired. It's like, okay, have we got a meal for you? And delivered with a friendly driver to your door. So again, I think it's a very relative term.
Yes, definitely. So we have a few minutes left.
Absolutely.
And I was wondering, I've heard about programs called Age and Dementia Friendly. What is Age and Dementia Friendly in relation to like Older Americans Month, or how does that fit into the SeniorCare mission?
Well, overall, there are age and dementia. Massachusetts, actually, at the state level, is an age-friendly state. I think that we were the second state to have that designation.
Oh, wow.
And age-friendly really means thinking about aging, and it really applies to any age. And when you think about it, it actually helps to put a lot of this into perspective, because something like having well-marked crosswalks that people actually need to stop at is very, very helpful for someone who may be using a walker or who may not move as quickly as someone else, and to be able to get across a busy street. But it's equally as helpful to a mom with or a dad with a toddler and pushing a stroller trying to get across the street. So really, age-friendly can work for people of any age. SeniorCare in particular, about 5 years ago, started the Age and Dementia Friendly Cape Ann initiative, and that is a way of intentionally making Cape Ann a place where people, regardless of background or gender or socioeconomic status, are able to really thrive and continue to be in the community. And that actually fits in equally well with SeniorCare's mission, which is helping older adults stay independent in the community of choice for as long as they want.
Excellent.
So age-friendly could be anything from, thinking about transportation and thinking about, what if I couldn't drive anymore? Would I be able to get to where I want to go to when I need to get there? And so having a robust transportation service that would allow people to be able to get around easily, having services in place if you do need services in place, having things like councils on aging where people can go and be with other folk, or having access to physical fitness. This is terrible, but one of my big, not terrible, but one of my personal factoids here is wanting to have restrooms available to people. If you have a recreational area and you have a trail, making sure that there's a restroom so that somebody who needs a restroom has access to that and can still get out and exercise and be outside and be doing what they want to do. Dementia Friendly is pretty much as it sounds. It's really making sure that our community is open and welcoming and aware of people with dementia. And that can be anything from, we run at SeniorCare and throughout Cape Ann, there's a lot of dementia-friendly trainings available so that people can have a chance to just think a little bit about what it might be like to be speaking to someone or, talking to someone with dementia. And just an awareness of that, knowing that someone may be behaving in a way that's, more to do with dementia than it is themselves, making sure that there's activities and inclusion that, people can still remain part of the community. So that's kind of where that dementia-friendly piece comes in.
I understand that there's going to be a Dementia Friends information session at the Sawyer Free Library in May.
There is, yeah.
If people want information about that, they can go to our website or they can call the Sawyer Free Library. What would a Dementia Friends program be? I mean, what does that do?
Dementia Friends is really kind of a very easy entry into getting a little bit more understanding of dementia and sort of how to be around, so not how to be around, but kind of understanding what the background is for someone with dementia, what their thought processes might be like, what their memory processes might be like. I mean, I think a lot of times, and this is not even linked to people with dementia. I mean, we all have times where it's easier to retrieve a memory than other times. And I think people of any age can stand there for a second and say, okay, wait, where exactly did I park the car? And you might need a reference point to be able to, get back to that. I mean, that may worsen. So it may be a way of kind of understanding where somebody's behavior is and making them comfortable.
Providing some empathy.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
So,
well, could we kind of link back a little bit to some of the Older Americans Act programming? And,
absolutely.
Kind of that theme of Older Americans Month, and really what you see from the what Older Americans Act and Older Americans Month started coming from is making sure that there is really a three-tiered outreach. At the top is the federal government, so it's national legislation, and that might be something like Medicare or these big broad federal programs that are out there. And then at the same time, state units were formed. So there is a state unit of aging in every state. In Massachusetts, we call it the Executive Office of Elder Affairs, and lots of people may have heard about that. And then there's the local, and there's area agencies on aging, and SeniorCare is one of those area agencies on aging. So the idea behind it being local is that we really have a chance to be on the ground and try to learn as much as we can about what the needs are in the 9 cities and towns that SeniorCare serves. And then we take that information and routinely every year we collect what kind of services we gave out to people. We collect numbers. We do anecdotal, talking around, like I just said, transportation, or mentioned transportation earlier, and transportation needs for on Cape Ann or in Beverly may be very different than the transportation needs that somebody might have in Western Mass or in Boston. So it allows us to kind of collect information on the needs in our area, and that goes to the state, and the state kind of collects all of that information and then files reports back to the federal government. So it's just that kind of chance to link all 3 of those levels of assistance.
Now, I've heard the phrase Area Agency on Aging, or a AAA.
Yeah.
And then I've also heard of an Aging Services Access Point, ASAP. And I know that SeniorCare is designated as both, as are many agencies like SeniorCare. What is the difference between a AAA and an ASAP?
So again, with SeniorCare, we are both. So in some parts of Massachusetts, they're more regional. There is one AAA for all of Boston, but there's 3 different ASAPs. But essentially, the Area Agency on Aging is really our federal side of things. So that's the federal money that comes down and is used for our programming, and there is a lot of overlap. ASAP is a Massachusetts designation, and really what happened with the Older Americans Act is that it opened a door. And what happened after that, it gets very dependent on the states. So there's a certain amount of funding that comes out to every state that's based on it's based on the census. Mm-hmm. And so that only changes every 10 years. And that money goes to that state unit that then has a way of dividing it up into the various area agencies on aging. Within Massachusetts, we have a very robust and very well-funded system through the generosity of the state of the taxpayers of Massachusetts and the state of Massachusetts that also help provide support. So we're able to add a lot to the service mix. So you wouldn't know at SeniorCare, it's not like you're not ineligible for one program or another because it's a state program or a federal program, but that state ASAP and the services that we get through ASAP funding are much more comprehensive. For example, SeniorCare has care managers who work one-on-one with older adults to determine a mix of services. And that could be anything from bringing in a caregiver, a home care or home health aide. It could be a companion. It could be the person needs a PERS, the devices that if you fall, there's notification. They may only need or want that and a meal, and that would be a service package for that particular person. And that can go all the way up to much more comprehensive care packages. So again, it's that the federal government kind of opened the door, but then individual states fill in a lot with their own funding and their own services.
So for the everyday person really doesn't care whether they're talking to the ASAP or the AAA. They're just looking for a comprehensive package that takes care of their individual need at that time.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of minutia that we don't need to confuse people with.
Yes, and I'm sorry if that was too, it really comes down to, give us a call or look on the website and find out what there is to offer.
Yeah.
And also what there is to contribute, because it really does. That kind of gets us back to Older Americans Month again, and the fact that and people are on both sides. I mean, we have people who are homebound who are friendly callers for other people who are homebound. So it doesn't mean, being homebound doesn't mean, you're overlooked or, you shouldn't be overlooked. So.
Yeah, we have people who knit extraordinary, beautiful homemade blankets and hats and such, and I'm sure some of those are homebound folks who otherwise might feel like they're not contributing, but what they're contributing now is amazing. So,
absolutely.
Anyway, so is there anything else that we haven't touched on that we should about Older Americans Month or the Older Americans Act?
No, and I would just say pay attention to, if you're looking for a celebration, if you're 65 or older or 60 or older or 55 or older and you're looking for, a celebration of Older Americans Month, take a look at your local Council on Aging programming that may be out there for something special. There'll be some media out there, and
excellent.
Just enjoy and celebrate your age no matter what your age is. How's that?
That sounds wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today at Living Wisely, Aging Well. To learn more about how SeniorCare might be able to help you or somebody in your family, give us a call at 978-281-1750, or you can visit our website, www.seniorcareinc.org, or you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn. There's lots of ways to find us. Have a great day. Thank you.